All right, welcome to part 2 of your QLab tutorials. So in this tutorial, what we're going to be working with is using fades. Now, there are lots of other functions you can do using QLab, as we've kind of mentioned throughout, but when you get right down to it, using fades, working that programming, is really the main thing you're going to be using for, especially if you're just working with sound. So, this is what we built last time. We have the Lou Reed loop here. That goes on forever. Then we have a cell phone, which we can either trigger with the space bar here, or I can just hit X whenever I like. And I can stop that in the middle of the ring by pressing Z or Z. Now here's a little issue we've got. I've got no way in the program to stop Lou Reed from playing unless I actually stop everything from playing. So let's work with a fade. I'm going to add a fade now, and I'm going to add this into the same tutorial folder. Now, I need to target it, which is why this X is here. It doesn't know what file it's supposed to be playing, so I'll just drag the Lou Reed file down here, and it'll now just by default say fade Lou Reed loop. But as you can see, there's no parameters for it to actually fade. So I'll click on here, and I will look at my different options. So there's basics, there's curve shape, which if you want to get very technical with it, there's levels, and audio effects. Generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend using audio effects, or relying on audio effects, I should say, with QLab. You can, but it's always best to just work with the files elsewhere. If you have Adobe Office, for example, that's a great way to work through Sound Booth or something along those lines. We've got all that also at the studio, so that's fine for you to use that too. So let's take a look at what we've got here. I want to be able to fade down Lou Reed, but say I don't want to fade down the cell phone. This is important because if I had moved this to outside, I could actually target the entire folder here, the entire tutorial group, and I could fade everything out. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. So what I'm going to show you here will apply to fading a group. It just depends on if you target either a file, in this case Lou Reed loop, or if you target the tutorial group, if you want it to work that way. So I need to tell it what to fade to. Now by default everything is set to fade completely out, but I haven't actually agreed to that, you could say. If I want that to happen, I could say set all silent, pulling this down to make sure it knows. So now let's take a look at what happens here. Lou Reed. When I come to fade Lou Reed, there it's happening. You can see the action actually takes 5 seconds. 5 seconds is also the default. You can change all this very easy. You just have to click and make the time whatever you like. So I'm just going to make it a 2 count, let's say. And you can see here the Lou Reed file is actually still playing. Now, if I want to change that, you can see here I'm still in my fade functions. I can click Stop Target when done. So here's the thing. If I go back to play Lou Reed now, it's still playing, and it's still silent. So, when I hit this one, it is going off a fade, and then it stops. We might not want it to stop, though. We may want it to keep going. So in this case, I'm just going to uncheck this, so it's just a fade for Lou Reed. I'm going to actually make it fade up now. So I'm going to add another fade here. I'm going to target the same file, and we'll stay with the 5 seconds here. And we're going to go back up to 0. Right. If we wanted to, we can make this a different curve shape. They've got some built-in ones, S-curve or just custom curve, which you can then start to modify yourself, however you like the curve function to be. In this case, I'm actually just going to stick with the S-curve. So, now what's programmed to happen is this Q here, Q5, is going to bring Lou Reed down. This Q here, Q6, is actually going to fade Lou Reed back up. So, let's see what happens when we go through the sequence. Now notice I'm skipping over the cell phone here just to show you the actual fades. If we were to actually be running the show, for that matter, I'll go back and I'll actually play them. So as we're running the show, this would probably have to play. The stop would have to happen. For this reason, you may want to keep these actually external because you do have a hotkey for them. In this case, though, we'll not worry about that right now. So let's go into the fades. We're going to fade Lou Reed down over 2 seconds. But Lou Reed's still playing. So whenever we feel like it, we wait for the cue and over 5 seconds, it comes back. Now, say we want to get a little bit fancy here. So what I'm going to do now is go into the cell phone ringing effect. I'm going to switch this now to an infinite loop, which means it just constantly will play. I'm going to move this stop cell phone effect out of our group here. So whenever I like, I can stop it. And that's by pressing the Z button or the Z button, whatever you prefer. Next, let's get the cell phone going. We can fade out Lou Reed. You can fade Lou Reed back up. Say we want to add another fade, and we're going to bring the cell phone actually to the other side of the room. So now we're going to use a little bit of motion. So what that means is I'm going to take this one, I'm going to change this to 0. I'm going to move this one down here. Now, to you it's going to sound like this is actually very, very much louder. But in the room, what's happened is I've just panned it over, essentially from left to right, and we're closer to the right speaker. So for that purpose, I'm actually going to bring the volume down, just to even it out a little bit so it's not as jarring. And I'm going to hit Z now to stop the cell phone because that's annoying. As you can see, we've still got an X here, no parameters. That would be why, because what I just changed accidentally was the actual cell phone itself. So that's fine. We'll just keep it how it is, coming from the right side. I'll just put the changes in to the fade. So we were at 1.4. So we'll do 3.0, which I believe is close to what we had in the one before. And we had it coming out of the left channel, so now we'll make it come out of the right channel. With the left channel on silent. Just make sure that's correct. Basically the opposite. Great. So let's see what happens now. phone starts. Lou Reed fades out. Lou Reed fades back in. Cell phone travels to that side of the room. Now, once again, you can use something like a truck sound, which might give you a better sense of it. And if you have more speakers, I'm just going to stop this. If you have more speakers, if you have an advanced sound setup, if you're running through a different sound card, this can be a very effective thing to get motion going. These principles apply to pretty much all the programming you're going to do. So before we wrap off, I'm just going to show you one more thing which could be useful, which is just programming a crossfade. So we've got the Lou Reed loop here. I'm going to bring in another song. Now when you drag and drop stuff on, you can also just pop it in wherever you like here. And you see it automatically makes it 2.5. If I wanted to, you just go in here, select all these files, say Q's, tools actually, renumber select tools, select Q's. I can say I want to go by 1, an increment of 1. I could use 0.5, 0.1, whatever I like, and click renumber, and now they're all in sequence again. So, let's make this file work. In fact, we don't need to do too much to it, so I'll just leave it as is. But as you know, what we would do is we could go in here, we could adjust the time, the loops, the exact start time. Just for the sake of it, let's give this a start time of, say, 5 seconds in, so you can see how that's worked. And on top of that, we can add, well, you could add a little fade in here, and that's done by just pressing this button here, which is the fade envelope in there. That creates an issue if you did want to make a loop, because then the loop would fade in and fade in again when it loops and fade in again when it loops. So if you're making loops, it's not the best way to go. But that is a strategy you could use. Now, we have our levels, which we can set. In this case, we'll just keep it at 0, but we could set them at whatever we like. So I'm going to do a crossfade now by inputting actually 2 fades. This is fade 1, and this is fade 2. So this one here, 3.5, is going to be assigned to Lou Reed. This one, 3.6, is going to be assigned to this one, MC Yogi. Now, if I want to fade out Lou Reed to 0, I then have to click here. You'll see the X, which tells us there's an issue. The issue is it doesn't know what to fade it to. We bring it to negative infinity. Here, we want to bring this up to a level, so we're just going to bring it to 0. And this is actually, I can tell you right now what's going to happen here. And actually, let me just show you what will happen. If I click MC Yogi, it'll work fine with Lou Reed. So Lou Reed happens. I fade Lou Reed out. MC Yogi starts. Watch what happens when I fade up MC Yogi. Absolutely nothing. And the reason for that is this is already set to 0. I want to set it to negative infinity, take it out completely so that it's starting from nothing and fading up. So if I want this to work now, I can manually operate this whole thing. So I can say Lou Reed. Now I fade Lou Reed down. And I want to start MC Yogi. Oh, and I need to fade it up. As you can see, it doesn't really get the effect of a crossfade. And that's where this little programming element becomes very handy. So in QLab, there are different functions that it will do for you here, which are nice and simple to work with. The first one here, which you'll see up here too, is an autofollow. So it knows that as soon as I were to hit this, to go. And this is going immediately, meaning as soon as I hit that Lou Reed cue, it's going to start to fade. So in that case, that's not what I want. I want to be able to establish that cue. So I'll just leave this one blank. But I do know that as soon as I want Lou Reed to fade, I want MC Yogi to start. Well, that's fine. And then I do want the fade up of MC Yogi to happen. So now we've just added those two autofollows. Let's see what happens. I hit it once to start Lou Reed. And once I feel like Lou Reed's established enough, I'll just hit this. Of course, that did do a fade, but it didn't really give you the full effect of a crossfade. And here it's just a simple matter of minute adjustments to the programming. So one of the things I would suggest doing here, if you want to get that kind of one to the next sound, is just changing the time on the fade up. So with an up time now of 3, it should give us a better fade up sound. A little bit better, but we can still tweak that to make it a little bit nicer. And we'll adjust the fade down time of Lou Reed's piece. So this is now, let's make it a 7 count. So they should really be able to cross over now. Let's hear it again. So you could do it that way. You can make it work however you like, just so you get the right sound. Your call. So, on top of all this, we've got that cell phone. So now, just stop all this. Now, let's just see how the autofollow feature would work. So I'm going to go back to the cell phone. I want it to be able to autofollow, which means it needs to go in the full one. So I'm just going to play once. And I'm going to add an autofollow to the cell phone. And the autofollow is this one here. It's got that little circle. And so it knows once this is complete, the next thing has to happen. So we'll say that we'll add another fade here. This is the new one. This will be a fade MC Yogi. Let's call him Fade Yogi. Yogi. So we will assign it to this song. And we will say that we want to bring that down to negative infinity. So once the phone has rung successfully all the way through, it will then know to fade MC Yogi. So let's see how that works all together. Lou Reed, the crossfade happens. And then cell phone rings. And now it starts to fade. So that's how you can use autofollows. If you, and also these next ones here, sorry. A little bit of a brain blank there. So that's how you can use these functions so that you can actually get the right programming. Now you can do other little things here too if you want to customize it more. There's Postwaits and Prewaits. So in this case, say I didn't like how quick that happens, but I don't want to have to worry about having to hit that button again. That's fine. So I want to keep this here as an autofollow. And what I'm going to do is add a pre-wait time of 4. The program seems to have conked out on me a bit. There we go. So we now just added on, yes, this here, and we wanted to add a pre-wait to the cell phone. We actually don't want to add it to the cell phone. We want to add it to MC Yogi of 4. So it's going to wait 4 seconds before this action actually happens. There's a Postwait here of 219, and that is actually because this is how long it will wait to trigger the next queue, and 219 is the length of the actual action of that phone ring. So let's go back to the top, see what this sounds like. Blue read, crossfade, phone. Phone is complete. We wait. Play it down. So just like that, you can program anything you like using QLab. It's quite simple. I would definitely recommend just playing around with the program, making little mixes if you should feel so possessed to do so. One last thing I'll show you right here is the show function. So this is all well and good for when you're editing, but when it comes down to a show, it's also got this other function here where you can go in and you can just make it a little bit cleaner for you to look at.